Welcome back to the Swivel Professional Sports Channel on YouTube. Welcome back to Swivel Chair Sports. I'm your host, Zach Zuckerberg. We're here with the host today, Aaron. Go say hi, Aaron.
Hi, if you like our content, be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment and let us know what you think.
Yep, we're creeping up on 100 subscribers, so it means a lot if you subscribe. And thank you for watching. But other than that, let's go ahead and get into it. So in this video, we're going to be continuing our off-season grading series by taking a look at the teams in the NFC East, which includes the Cowboys, Giants, Eagles, and Commanders. If you haven't seen our first few grading videos, we're going to be taking a look at the key departures, key additions in free agency and trades, as well as the notable 2024 draft picks before revealing our grades for each team in the division. But without further ado, starting off with the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys last season endured yet another playoff disappointment, this time becoming the first team in NFL history to ever lose to a 7th seed in the playoffs at the hands of the Green Bay Packers. This offseason, Jerry Jones proclaimed they were going all in an attempt to finally get over the hump, and in retrospect, it's an interesting choice of words, I suppose. Starting off with the key departures in Dallas this offseason, most notably losing a couple of key Pro Bowl linemen on the offensive side of the football. Watching both tackle Tyrone Smith and interior lineman Tyler Biadasz leave in free agency this summer, with Smith signing with the New York Jets after 13 years for the Cowboys that included 5 All-Pro selections and 8 Pro Bowl honors. Meanwhile, Biadasz heads off to division rival Washington after starting in all 49 games he played over the last 3 seasons in Dallas. Also on the offense, Tony Pollard signed a deal with Tennessee after coming off of a 1,000-yard season where he only averaged about 4 yards a carry, so a bit of a drop-off in efficiency after the increase in carries he received last season in comparison to his 2022 numbers. The Cowboys also lost some talent on the defensive side of the football, parting ways with second-place sack getter last year, edge rusher Dorrance Armstrong to the rival Commanders, as well as fellow edge rusher Dante Fowler, who joins him and Biadasz in Washington. On top of watching one of their top D tackles last season, Jonathan Hankins, leave and sign with the Seattle Seahawks, and 2 defensive backs in Stephon Gilmore and Jaron Kerr still sitting unemployed. And sadly, linebacker Leighton Vander Esch was forced into early retirement due to persistent spine issues. As for the additions go for the Cowboys this offseason, first signing middle linebacker Eric Kendricks, who's recorded 100-plus tackles in every season of his career outside his rookie year, to help replace some of the production lost after Vander Esch announced his retirement. Dallas also brought in a couple of running backs this offseason in Royce Freeman and familiar face Ezekiel Elliott, who returns to Dallas after a 1-year banishment to the crumbling kingdom known as New England. Freeman last season for the Rams rushed for 319 yards on 77 carries, while Ezekiel Elliott is coming off the worst year of his career last season, rushing for only 642 yards on a measly 3.5 yards a carry. And as far as the draft, Dallas first tried to find their Tyrone Smith replacement, taking tackle Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma 29th overall, who some consider to be a project at the NFL level, but after not allowing a single sack last season, he could also be an immediate impact player right away. Following up in the second round, the Cowboys tried to replace some of the edge rush production they lost this offseason, selecting Marshawn Kneeland out of Western Michigan in the second round, and in the third round, again replacing one of their major losses on the offensive line, taking interior lineman Cooper Beebe out of Kansas State, who was one of the best linemen in college football the last 2 seasons, before taking cornerback Kalen Carson out of Wake Forest in the 5th round, a pretty physical corner that forced 5 incompletions in single coverage last season and led the team with 8 pass deflections despite not recording a single interception. So Aaron, what are your thoughts on the Cowboys offseason this year?
Yeah, some big losses there on the offensive lineman with Tyron Smith and Lael Collins leaving. Obviously, Tyron Smith's been there since 2011's been one of the mainstays there. Going out and getting a guy like Tyler Guyton, that's a big pickup for them. Hopefully he'll be as good as everyone hopes he is, and he's there for a while to come. Losing Tony Pollard, that hurts. Obviously, he led the team in rushing last year. He was their feature back. So I'm not sure Ezekiel Elliott can live up to his former self, but maybe he'll be, some fraction of that player, and combined with some of the other running backs, they might have a decent run game. They brought in, shout out Nathaniel Pete, former Mizzou running back. Never
Hey,
really got his chance, as he got there kind of at the same time as Cody Schrader, and he took off for Mizzou. So maybe he'll kind of develop into his own there in Dallas. But yeah, just some tough losses on that O-line, but trying their best to make it up there.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest losses are on the offensive line, I think you could say. Defense, they didn't lose a ton. I mean, Stephon Gilmore was towards the end of his rope. You got to, even though he did have a good season last year. I mean, he is, on the wrong side of 30. And then Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler. I definitely think you could find some better production out there in free agency, or maybe even the draft, which they took a chance on with Western Michigan edge rusher Marshawn Nealand. So I do think the Cowboys, the draft, I think, saved them from a really bad offseason, in my opinion. Because I think free agency...
Well, yeah, they didn't do anything in free
Yeah,
agency.
they didn't do anything in free agency, really at all, outside of bringing back Ezekiel Elliott and Eric Kendricks, who I think is good. But outside of that, they didn't really do anything. So I definitely think the draft
Lost
saved
Michael
them.
Gallup, who's been a reliable number 2.
Yeah, that's a good
receiver,
point.
probably number 3 overall target behind, whoever their number 1 was. Now CeeDee Lamb and their resident tight end, whoever Dak decides to fall in love with.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I do think. I mean, I don't think Gallup was a huge loss personally, because he's had some inconsistency the last couple seasons. A lot of that's due to injury, because he can't stay on the field like he was able to earlier in his career. But that is obviously a good thing to note as well, because the less weapons you have for Dak to throw to, the harder it is for him to succeed. It seems he really needs some good talent around him. He's not able to exactly carry a team like some of the other premier quarterbacks in the league. Not saying he's bad by any means, but I do think Dak needs a little bit more help than your typical superstar quarterback. I think being quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, you get a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. Case in point, Tony Romo.
I think he can carry the team when they're down 14, 21 points. Other teams in prevent defense.
Yeah. He's good at putting up
carry him
garbage
back
stats.
to a close loss.
Yeah, he's good at putting up garbage stats after the game's already said and done. But yeah, as far as this offseason goes, I if it wasn't for the draft, I might be nearing D territory for this team. But I do really do like their draft. Cooper Beebe, I thought, was a really good lineman addition, as well as Tyler Guyton was. So I think they made the right picks. Whether or not those guys are going to be ready to make an immediate impact is to be seen. But with that being said, I think I'm going to settle on a C+ for the Dallas Cowboys this offseason. If it wasn't for the draft and how they performed, it would probably be C-, maybe even D+. But their draft saved them in my eyes. So
another thing to note, lost their defensive coordinator Dan Quinn. Now that's not necessarily their fault.
Yeah.
He goes and gets the job in
Washington.
Right?
Yeah,
Washington. So that hurts. We'll have to see what that defense looks like this year. Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. I think a C is kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think, man, they lost a lot of good, reliable talent. Leighton Vander Esch retiring obviously was unexpected, so that stinks for them, on top of losing the 2 offensive linemen. 3, I guess, if you count La'el Collins. So yeah, the draft is the only bright spot I see this offseason. Although I do think it was a really solid draft for them. So hopefully they can make their way back to the playoffs this next season and finally get over the hump for their sake. But I think it's to be seen, and I could honestly see them even possibly missing the playoffs if things don't go their way. So
Do you think them not taking a lot of swings in free agency is them gearing up to pay Dak?
That's the only thing that I can think of as to being why. Because if you were expecting this to be like the last run with Dak, you would try to do your best to bring in as much talent around him as you could, I would imagine, as well as preparing for that inevitable replacement down the line by building up that team around the quarterback position. So I think it's a sign that yeah, they're probably going to end up paying Dak next offseason. Whether or not I think that's the right move, but I do think it's probably going to happen.
Great when they're down in the fourth quarter. He's great when they're down.
Like, I don't think he's a terrible quarterback. I really don't. I just don't think he's that game changer that his contract is going to signify he is. Is my main issue. I think he's going to be significantly overpaid. But that's just the market now, and he's just next man up on the market. So it's kind of unfortunate for Dallas in that case. But I do think it is a sign that they're going to pay him.
Whatever his contract is, he won't be as overpaid as this next team we're going to talk about's quarterback.
Yeah, and moving on to that team, the New York Giants. The Giants last season suffered through a tumultuous year where they witnessed their starting quarterback, and as you mentioned, Aaron, man, they just gave a $160 million contract to, in Daniel Jones, go down with an injury in the first half of the season that limited him to only 6 games, where they were an abysmal 1-5, before alternating between backup quarterbacks Tyrod Taylor and Italian folk hero Tommy DeVito, with the Giants finishing 6-11 and with the top 10 pick in the draft once again. This offseason, they looked to give Daniel Jones one last chance and tried to bring in some new and improved pieces to surround him with. But first, the key losses for New York, starting off with the most notable. Running back Saquon Barkley appears to turn heel on the Giants franchise by signing with hated rival Philadelphia Eagles to a multiple-year deal. After 6 seasons in New York, where injuries limited him from reaching his full potential, but when he was on the field, he was one of the most dynamic running backs in the league. Most of the other notable losses took place on the defensive side of the football, with defensive tackle A'Shawn Robinson signing with the Carolina Panthers after the Giants already traded away fellow D-tackle Leonard Williams to the Seattle Seahawks during last season. The Giants also parted ways with defensive backs Xavier McKinney, who signed with the Packers, and Adoree Jackson, who still has yet to find a new home. As for the key additions New York made, they swung a trade for edge rusher Brian Burns from Carolina for a 2nd and 5th round pick, or signing him to a 5-year contract to play opposite Kayvon Thibodeau for the foreseeable future. The Giants also focused on improving the offensive line by adding veteran tackle Jermaine Eliminour from the Las Vegas Raiders and guard John Runyon from the Green Bay Packers. Both guys that should provide some much improved protection for Daniel Jones or whoever is the quarterback for the Giants this upcoming season. And in an effort to replace some of the production lost by parting ways with Saquon Barkley, the Giants signed running back Devin Singletary, who's rushed for over 800 yards in each of the last 3 seasons. They also took a flyer on a personal favorite of ours, quarterback Drew Lock, to back up Daniel Jones and potentially step in for Jones if he goes down with injury again or falls out of favor with coaching staff during the season. And looking at the draft, New York brought in new number 1 target on the outside, Malik Neighbors out of LSU with the 6th overall pick, coming off of a 1,500-yard, 14-touchdown season with the Tigers. Then in the 2nd, they took what some consider to be the top safety in the class this year, drafting Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota, and quarterback Andrew Phillips out of Kentucky, who was one of the better cornerbacks in the SEC last year. So Aaron, how are you feeling about the Giants offseason?
Yeah, losing Saquon, especially to the Eagles, that's gotta sting a little bit extra. Xavier McKinney, obviously one of the better safeties in the league. But then you bring in, kind of trying to stir up that offensive line, John Runyon and Jermaine Eliminour. So they're making steps in the right direction. Devin Singletary, he's not the most special guy, but he's a solid running back that'll get the job done. A little bit different running style than Saquon, so we'll see how they can adjust with that. Losing Tyrod Taylor, but then you bring in Drew Lock, so you got a good, capable quarterback there who, maybe a future starter depending on how this season goes. And then I love them bringing in Allen Robinson. They've still got some good young receivers there. Obviously, Malik Neighbors, Wandale Moore, Jalen Hyatt. Those are some young guys that they've gotten recently that that Allen Robinson can be a mentor for. So, and then as far as the draft goes, obviously Malik Neighbors, great pick. Tyler Newman had, I believe, like 5 picks last year as a safety. So he's showing some promise there. And then Theo Johnson out of Penn State, tight end. Not the most production, but he showed to be a reliable red zone target with 11 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons, including 7 last year. So replacing Darren Waller, who is seemingly going to retire. I think it's important that they got a young guy in there.
Yeah, I forgot to mention the career-ending heartbreak that Darren Waller went through this offseason that forced him into early retirement after WNBA star Kelsey Plum just ripped his heart out of his chest, causing him to release what's quite possibly the cringiest and worst rap song I've ever heard in my life. But
he's hurting, man. He's
to each their own, man. Heartbreak sucks, so shout out to him, and hopefully he gets through all that, and everything. But yeah, I think the Giants I think they took a step in the right direction this offseason. Losing Saquon does hurt, but everything else they did makes tons of sense. I don't really consider the Leonard Williams trade to be involved in this offseason stuff because it happened during the season last year. So really, Saquon Barkley was the only super relevant name that they lost during the actual offseason. And Xavier McKinney, yes, I forgot about him, the safety, one of the better safeties in the league. But bringing in 2 really good linemen, that I think was your biggest problem on the offensive side of the football last year, was you just couldn't protect anybody, whether it was the quarterback or, trying to even open holes for Saquon Barkley or in the running game. Yeah, Devin Singletary is not anything special, but like I said, he's reliable. 800 yards a season, that's decent, that's solid. You'll take that out of your starting running back if he's splitting time, especially. And then I really like their draft as well. So, I mean, if Drew Lock was the starting quarterback this next year, they'd get an A++ without a doubt. I think we can all agree on that if Horsecock Lock was under center, everything would be different. But all jokes aside, I think I got the Giants with a B- this offseason. I really like their draft and free agency acquisitions for the most part. I think Brian Burns playing opposite side Kayvon Thibodeau is a really good acquisition, as well as signing him to a 5-year contract. He's really young, and he'll just continue to grow, hopefully, opposite side Thibodeau. So, yeah, I was pretty impressed with what the Giants did this offseason. Not the Saquon Barkley loss obviously probably knocks him down a peg. Otherwise, I might have him a little higher. But I think I'm happy with giving him a B-.
See, I was thinking B-, but then you throw in Saquon and Xavier McKinney. Those are 2 massive losses. Did bring in, John Runyon, Illuminor, Brian Burns. Yeah, I can convince myself a B-.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll see the immediate impact of this season, this season's off season.
Right.
This is probably a step for the next couple seasons. I don't think you're going to show a lot of progress as long as Daniel Jones is still behind center, especially without a premier running back. So I think this is a good off season for the future.
I will say this, if Daniel Jones does come out and, surprise us all and ends up, taking a massive leap forward like, he probably needed to last year, then a lot of things could be different for this team. This team may be sneaky dangerous, and, I mean, I could even see Malik Neighbors being in Rookie of the Year conversations if Daniel Jones is, actually good. So, I think it'll be a fun team to watch, all things considered. Hopefully Drew Lock does get in there, get some reps as far, as Mizzou fans, we hope that, as Giants fans, maybe you guys don't, but Mizzou fans, we just really want to see a quarterback succeed in the NFL just once, please. Blaine Gabbert didn't really work out very well.
Chase Daniel is the greatest backup of all time.
He is we got a backup. We got a great backup, but we're still looking for
We
that
got two
starting.
great backups. Gabbard's been a solid backup.
Yeah, man,
Saves
he
some
was
people's
drafted.
lives.
You
on
don't
jet
you don't
ski.
you don't draft a man 13th overall to be a backup, Aaron.
Well, I think that happens all too often, Burke.
It's fair. Yeah, I think it'll be fun to see what the Giants do this year. I think they could be sneaky dangerous, maybe surprise some people. I mean, they did beat the Eagles in the last game of the season last year with Tommy DeVito under center. So, who knows? Maybe they could scare some people in the NFC East. Moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles were coming off of a Super Bowl appearance last season and started off the season on fire, going 10-1 in their first 11 games, before falling off a cliff and going 1-5 in their last 6 games after their secret weapon and security guard, Big Dom, was ejected from a Week 13 game against the 49ers, where Big Dom got into
promotion.
I heard that. Yeah, I heard he got a promotion. But yeah, he got into an altercation with Niners linebacker Dre Greenlaw, and you can't really do that on the as a security guard. So yeah, he got ejected. They ended up losing 5 of their next 6, and that's all she wrote. Eagles went on to lose to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the wild card round, and hopefully look to get the train back on track this offseason. So, starting off with the key departures this year, the Eagles watched franchise cornerstone center Jason Kelce ride off into the sunset and retire after a storied 13-year career where he was widely regarded as one of the best linemen in the league during his tenure. They also parted ways with defensive tackle Fletcher Cox, who joins Kelce in retirement this offseason after his 12 years with the Eagles himself, and some other defensive talent in edge rusher Hassan Reddick, who they traded to the Jets for a 3rd-round pick, and linebackers Nicholas Morrow and Zach Cunningham, with Morrow signing with the Bills and Cunningham remaining unsigned. On top of all that, the Eagles also watched running back DeAndre Swift walk out the door and sign with the Chicago Bears after rushing for over 1,000 yards on more than 4.5 yards a carry. As for the key acquisitions, the Eagles were not shy when it came to adding talent through free agency, most notably bringing in longtime Giants running back Saquon Barkley, who looks to replace Swift's production and then some, with his ability to run the ball as well as catch it out of the backfield at a high level. Other than that, Philadelphia brought in a plethora of defensive production, with edge rusher Bryce Huff from the Jets, who recorded double-digit sacks for the first time in his career last season, despite not starting a single game, as well as linebacker Devin White, who's made at least 120 tackles in every season he's played 15 games or more. They also brought back an old friend in C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who at the very least should bring some extra attitude to a secondary that could use an extra edge. As for the draft, the Eagles did not hesitate to continue adding more talent to a weak secondary, drafting cornerback Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo and Cooper DeJean out of Iowa in the 1st and 2nd rounds respectively. Mitchell was seen as many as potentially being the top cornerback in this year's draft, while DeJean comes into the league as a bit of a Swiss Army knife with experience playing just about everywhere in the defensive backfield during his college years. After that, the Eagles brought in some more defensive prospects, taking edge rusher Jaleeks Hunt from Houston Christian in the 3rd round, and linebacker Jeremiah Trotter Jr. out of Clemson in the 5th round, with Hunt being seen as an intriguing prospect coming out of a smaller school, while Trotter Jr. has NFL football in his blood, being the son of former Eagles linebacker Jeremiah Trotter, so could be a great... Yeah, right, wild, right? Who would have thought? But that could be a great story if Trotter Jr. can develop into a solid linebacker at the pro level. So Aaron, what are you thinking about the Eagles offseason this year?
You lose a guy of DeAndre Swift's caliber, but then you bring in somebody who's one of the premier backs in the league, Saquon Barkley, when he's healthy. Hopefully they can keep him healthy and he stays healthy and has a good year there in Philly. But then you also lose Kevin Byard, who's seemingly turning into a journeyman safety who's still very solid for, I guess, his age. Traded for Kenny Pickett. So that kind of confused some people, but, you know, whatever they want to do there in Philly. Bringing in back Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who's made his transition to safety, kind of shoring up that weak secondary, and then arguably the worst part of their defense last year was their linebacking core, due to injuries and whatnot. But bringing in Devin White, that's a big experience and just overall talent boost to that linebacking core. And then obviously Mekhi Becton, losing some of their offensive line this offseason, it hurts. But then you bring in a guy of Mekhi Becton's talent who's kind of showed some promise these last few years. That's real big. Then kind of onto the draft, kind of like you said, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Those are two of probably the most highly touted defensive back prospects that we've seen these last few years. Cooper DeJean falling to them in the second round, I think that's massive. The fact that they were able to bring him in to kind of strengthen that secondary as well. And then Aeneas Smith out of A&M, I think he's a sneaky good pick for where they were able to get him in the 5th round. So yeah, I think they had a pretty good offseason, all things considered.
Yeah, when it started off, I was kind of laughing, to be honest. I was like, oh man, Saquon Barkley. Yeah, he's great addition, but it doesn't really fix the concerns that you had with this Eagles team heading into this offseason. So I was just kind of laughing, giggling to myself, like, you got the big name, suckers. And then they went out and did the rest of the stuff, and I was like, well, gosh damn it, man. Like, they did really well, you know? Like, they went out, they got Devin White, which was a great addition. Like you said, linebacker, one of their weakest positions last year, and they get one of the premier guys out of Tampa Bay in Devin White. The better one of the two, probably, between him and Lamonte David. At least the younger one, so you can develop him, and he can continue to grow in Philadelphia. And then the second most, detrimental part of their team last year was probably the secondary. You know what they do? They go into the draft, they get 2 out of the top 5 motherfuckers in that draft at that position to bring in, and Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. So now, you're looking here and you're like, well, damn, they kind of plugged all the holes that they had this offseason for the most part, as well as improving a running game, assuming Saquon Barkley can be healthy this next season. So while losing the offensive line production, I think does help in Jason Kelce, like you said. Bringing in Mekhi Becton to kind of compensate for that was a pretty good move on their part. I'm mad. They did really well, Aaron. They did really well, and it's disappointing to me because Nick Sirianni pisses me off. But it's a fun rivalry. Shout out to Philadelphia fans. Y'all had a great offseason. I'm giving y'all an A because your draft was amazing. And then really the free agency acquisitions you made after Saquon Barkley really just kind of impressed me. I did not think you'd be able to do that. So shout out to y'all and congrats on a great offseason. Gosh dang it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think A is a fair grade to give them. I mean, they kind of replaced all of their losses with equal or better talent, and then filled in the holes that they had from last year. So they should be a force to reckon with this upcoming season. It'll be fun to watch. Now Dallas won the division last year, so
they have to win it this year, right?
They can't win the division this year.
Yeah, like that means Philly has to win.
I think Philly's in a good position to not only make the playoffs but contend for the division and maybe a 1 seed.
Yeah, I expect the Eagles to bounce back in a big way this year after a disappointing end to the regular season last year. As long as Big Dom doesn't get suspended, I mean they're a Super Bowl contender.
That's a big thing.
So yeah, keep Big Dom on the field and everything will just fall into place after that. So moving on to our final team, the Washington Commanders. The Commanders last season suffered through another rough year, finishing 4-13 and honored with the 2nd overall pick in the 2024 draft. This offseason, the Commanders looked to change the culture again for like the 100th time in the last 30 years. Starting off with key departures for Washington, the biggest losses for the Commanders came in the defensive backfield, losing both cornerback Kendall Fuller, who signed with the Miami Dolphins, and safety Cameron Curl, who signed with the Los Angeles Rams. Fuller was the team leader in interceptions and 3rd in pass deflections last season, while Cameron Curl was 2nd on the team in tackles. The Commanders also said goodbye to 2nd leading receiver Curtis Samuel, who signed with Buffalo and hopes he can take over the wide receiver 1 duties, with both Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis playing elsewhere this year. And also on the offense, Washington parts ways with both quarterbacks Sam Howell, who they traded to Seattle, and Jacoby Brissett, who signed with the New England Patriots, as well as backup running back Antonio Gibson, who joins Brissett on the Pats. Moving on to the key additions, the Commanders really made an effort to bring in a lot of new faces and new voices in the locker room, including a new coach in Dan Quinn from the Dallas Cowboys. But as far as player personnel goes, they brought in veteran running back Austin Eckler from the Chargers, who I assume they plan on splitting carries with Brian Robinson, with Eckler surprisingly yet to crack 1,000 yards rushing in any single season throughout his entire career, and seems to have more success in a platoon-type system. Also on the offensive side, the Commanders signed interior offensive lineman Tyler Biadasz, who, as mentioned earlier, has started on the offensive line for the Cowboys for the majority of his career. Other than that, though, the focus for Washington seemed to be on improving the defense, bringing in 3 experienced edge rushers to compensate for trading both Chase Young and Montez Sweat away during the previous season, signing Clelin Ferrell away from the Niners and both Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler from the division rival Dallas Cowboys, following their defensive coordinator to the nation's capital. On top of all that, they also brought in veteran linebackers Bobby Wagner from Seattle and Frankie Louvu from Carolina, who should provide some strong leadership in the locker room as Washington tries to turn their culture around. Looking into the draft for the Commanders, obviously the biggest story is drafting hopefully their new franchise quarterback Jaden Daniels, 2nd overall out of LSU. Daniels last season threw for over 3,800 yards and 40 touchdowns, while also rushing for an additional 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns en route to a Heisman Trophy. After that, Washington went right back to focusing on defense, selecting defensive lineman Jerzon Newton out of Illinois and cornerback Mike Sanderstill out of Michigan, both in the 2nd round. Newton was considered a first-round talent by many that slipped into the 2nd, while Sanderstill is coming off of a national championship appearance with the Wolverines, where he picked off opposing quarterback Michael Penix Jr. once and even led the team in tackles to help bring the trophy home to Ann Arbor. Washington then wanted to bring in some more offensive talent to develop around their rookie quarterback, taking tight end Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State in the 2nd round, and in the 3rd round, selecting tackle Brandon Coleman out of TCU and wide receiver Luke McCaffrey out of Rice, with Sinnott being viewed as a bit of a reach by some, but Brandon Coleman looks to have potential as an offensive lineman that could move to the interior if tackle doesn't quite work out for him. And McCaffrey, of course, is the son of former Denver Broncos wide receiver Ed McCaffrey, who won 3 Super Bowls throughout his career. Oh, and Luke's brother I hear is pretty good too, but
and nobody cares about him.
yeah, so Aaron, how are you feeling about the culture shift going on in DC right now?
Culture shift number 1042.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I like the moves. They lost some key players. Curtis Samuel, big loss on the defense. Not only trading away, like you said, Montez Sweat and Chase Young, but losing Kendall Fuller, Cameron Curl, Cody Barton, who played a lot for them this year. Those are some tough losses. But then they bring in Frankie Louvu, who had similar production to Barton last year. In the draft, you go and get Mike Sanderstill, who I think in our mock draft predictions, I think I kind of compared him to Tre'Davious White. So hopefully he can stay healthy. He's a bit on the smaller side, but kind of that physical, smaller back that's quick as well. So hopefully he kind of continues to improve there. I love their first 4 picks in the draft. I'm being honest. Jaden Daniels was my number 1 coming out. Most ready quarterback. And then Johnny Newton, just an absolute force on the interior. Already talked about Mike. And then Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State. Probably needs to get on the jugs machine and work on his hands a bit, but he's probably one of the better overall tight ends in this draft. Big physical guy, decent running after the catch. Love Ben Sinnott. And then bringing in Nick Allegretti and Michael Dieter, 2 experienced guards especially Allegretti having several Super Bowl runs and not only just sitting on the bench for those, but being a pivotal role, especially in this last one with the Chiefs, with Tooney being out. So those are some big acquisitions that they've made, um, and I'm a fan. I'm a fan.
Yeah, I really liked what the Commanders did this offseason. I think the 30 millionth culture shift that the Washington Commanders they haven't been successful really consistently for a consistent period of time since like what the 80s. Was that really the last time they were like consistently good like for more than just a handful of seasons at a time? It seems so. Hopefully, this is
Yeah.
finally the shift in the culture that they've been looking for so long. I really do like the defensive additions. Go ahead.
Need to change their name though.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. Better than the Washington football team, though. You know, better than
I
that.
actually think I would prefer the Washington football team
Really?
to the Commanders.
Regardless, they do need a new name. I agree with that. But I think the defensive additions they made this offseason made a ton of sense. I think they were really good. Clellan Ferrell, Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler. They're not going to be as good as Chase Young and Montez Sweat were probably, but they're cheaper for sure than having to pay those two guys would have been. So that's a big thing that you got to kind of look at. And I do think that their veteranship will come into play as far as leadership in the locker room goes. So I do think those three were pretty decent additions. Frankie Luvu, like you said, was really big. I think he can learn a lot from fellow free agent acquisition Bobby Wagner, who's been around the league for quite some time now and won a Super Bowl with the Seattle Seahawks back in his day. I think even was he with the Rams when they won theirs as well? I can't remember if he was on them quite yet. I know he was on the Rams around that time. I'm not sure if he was on them that season, but yeah, Bobby Wagner has tons of experience, really good leader. He's known to be a really good locker room guy, so I thought that was a really smart move, bringing him in to try to shift the culture. Dan Quinn had success as a head coach in Atlanta, despite the 28-3 game that we all clown him and the Falcons for. He was really good, getting them even to the Super Bowl in the first place and getting up 25 points on the Tom Brady, Bill Belichick Patriots. There's something to be said about that at least. So I think their head coach hire was pretty solid. They bring in a lot of guys that kind of fit his culture and mentality that he wants to build on the defensive side of the football. Drafting Johnny Newton, Mike Sanders still, two physical guys, I think was a really good move on their part as well. I love their draft. Agree with you there. Jaden Daniels could be the best quarterback in this draft when it's all said and done, for all we know. I forgot to mention Nick Allegretti. I think they're trying to build up that offensive line around Jaden Daniels so they don't hopefully have another RG3 situation on their hands. So yeah, I really love what the Commanders did this offseason. I think they did about as good as you could to take a step in the right direction for them. I mean, this franchise was a dumpster fire last season, so there's really nowhere to go from up with this team. And with that being said, I think they're going to be an A+ for me. I really love what they did this offseason. I think they made a huge commitment to improve the team. Bringing in Austin Eckler to pair alongside Brian Robinson, much better platoon option than Antonio Gibson was, who, was quite inconsistent with his carries. You weren't sure what you were going to get out of him. Bringing a more reliable back with Austin Eckler to pair back there, I think was good. And then all the other additions they made that I mentioned as well. So A+ for me.
I don't know that I'll go that high. I am with you that they're up there. I'll probably give them an A. Can't forget, or would be remiss to leave out them bringing in Sam Hartman in undrafted free agency, the QB out of Notre Dame. So they've got a little bit of insurance there in case something does happen with Jaden Daniels, God forbid. That would just be so disappointing.
It'd be Washington. It'd be the Washington football franchise.
It would be Washington.
Yeah.
It would be so Washington. Yeah. Well, I think it'd be more Jets, but
I don't know.
Right
Theismann, RG3, Alex Smith. Washington ain't no slouch when it comes to quarterback injuries.
Yeah, but they've got a good receiving core. probably have to look to extend Terry McLaurin here soon.
Yeah.
And then kind of the probably platoon type running back situation that they're gonna have to go with, making improvements on the O-line, being fortunate enough or unfortunate enough to be in the position to go up and get their franchise guy, Jaden Daniels. I think an A is a solid pick or solid grade for them.
Yeah, the only reason I give them an A+ is because they really, in my eyes, knocked the draft out of the park after having a great free agency for their standards. Because, I mean, free agency was already, in my opinion, impressive by their standards. I was not expecting them to bring in this plethora of veteran talent that they did. So it's nice to see them making an effort to try to improve the roster. Hopefully that the new ownership group, right? Because they got a new owner over there in Washington now. Hopefully that new ownership group is more committed to not being a piece of shit and building up a good franchise than the prior owner. So fuck Dan Schneider, and hopefully this franchise can finally take that big step in the right direction after years of mediocrity. So
the only thing that keeps it from being an A+ for me is that free agency class has got a lot of age. So I'm not sure.
It does. That is.
I'm not sure how long there'll be an impact for. Definitely for this season, you hope that they show they don't show their age quite yet. But yeah, that's really the only thing keeping me from giving them an A+.
Yeah, I do think that was a strategic move by them, though, bringing in more veteran guys with a better leadership mentality, guys who've been around the block a time or two, can give some advice to those younger guys, because they are a really young team outside of these free agency acquisitions for the most part. I think that's kind of where their head was at, bringing in mostly older veteran guys around the age, if not over the age of 30. So, but yeah, I think they did really well. I think this whole division's going to be interesting. The Eagles, Cowboys are probably going to be atop it as they have been for the last few seasons. Maybe the Commanders can be sneaky if Jaden Daniels is really good this year. Maybe Daniel Jones isn't as dog shit as we all think he is, and the Giants aren't bad. Who knows? Yeah. Maybe the Giants are okay. Maybe the Commanders can be sneaky good in Jaden Daniels' first year, but it's probably going to come down to the Eagles or the Cowboys. And like you said, the Cowboys, it's impossible for an NFC East team to win the division back-to-back years. So it's just going to come down to the Eagles winning the division and the Cowboys getting a wild card maybe. So unless you got anything else, Aaron, I think that'll do it for this episode of the most unprofessional sports channel on YouTube, Swivel Chair Sports. I've been your host, Zach Circleberg-Burkle, here with the host today, Aaron. Go and say bye, Aaron.
Bye.
All right. Really want to appreciate you guys for watching. Thank you for sticking around this far. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Tell a friend. Share this to a family member, maybe. Other than that, I think that'll do it. Deuces. Have a good day.